Well, thank you very much for joining us today. What we're going to discuss is the SPICE simulation capabilities in Altium Designer, both what's built into Altium Designer and also the recent improvement they made in which they can now interface with Texas Instruments Webench. So what we're going to do first is we're going to actually build a very quick little project. We're going to make sure that it works in Altium. You'll see a few little features there that you may have not been aware of in the past. And then from there we'll take it on to the Webench aspect of it. So I've got an existing project right over here. This is the 555 A-stable multi-vibrator. Now, so Altium does have a number of SPICE simulation examples that you can refer to. Now, in the past, they used to provide these examples with the program. However, a lot of those things were removed to try to reduce the size of Altium Designer when it came to downloading it from their servers. But they are still available, and it's just a matter of either contacting Altium or better yet, look on their website and you should be able to find those. They have a number of different examples. This 555 A-stable multi-vibrator is one of the examples that they have. But actually what we're going to do here today is we're actually going to make our own so that you have a feel for how things work. So I'm going to do a new project. I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to go into Project down here. You'll notice that this looks a little bit different from what you may have seen in the past. We are using Altium Designer 14.3. I'm pretty much going to leave everything alone over here. However, I am going to change the location name. All right, and so here we go. So we've got the Altium tutorials. This is where we're going to be putting this for today. The project name, as we'll just call it Simple SPICE. All right, and then we'll press OK. And we're not worried about all the other things that they're doing over there. Just for now, I just want a simple PRJ PCB. All right, do need to add a sheet into this, so I'm going to do File, New, and I'm going to add in my sheet, my schematic up here. And of course, I could have always right-clicked on this and done that as well. This did show up in the wrong project. I'm just going to simply drag it down, and there we are. We're good to go. I am going to save everything at this point, so I'll do Save Project. One thing to note is that with anything in Altium Designer, it can't save the PRJ PCB until all the subsequent files that are associated with it are also saved as well. So I am going to give this a name. Again, I'll call it Simple SPICE. All right, and then it's going to ask me again if I want to save the other one. And in this case, since it already had a name, it's good to go. So again, it always needs to save those files that are associated before it can actually save the PRJ PCB. All right, so now we got a clean slate over here, and we're going to put a few things in here. The first thing I'll do is I've got my miscellaneous devices library up. It's the one of the two libraries that Altium still provides outside of the vault. And if there's other components you need, then you got to go to their vault in order to pull them down. But for this case, I'm just going to simply type in resistor over here, res. All right, I'm just going to take a look at these. This will be fine, so I'm going to press place here, and I will put this in. I am going to hit my space bar to rotate it. And I'm also going to hit my page up key so you can see what I'm doing over here. I am going to hit my tab key, all right? And in my tab key over here, I'm going to call this one R1, and I'm going to leave the value at 1K. So I'm going to place this down over here, and as I place this down, I'm going to also get R2 as well, and that'll be fine. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap because you'll see why in a moment here, and I'm going to right click to end this. So it should look rather familiar to you, especially if you used Altium Designer in the past. What about the SPICE simulation aspect of that? Well, we can click in this. Altium's already set up the resistor simulation for this. And in fact, in Altium Designer, you really don't have to do a whole lot with the resistor. If there is no model associated with it, you can always say add, and then you can go over here and say simulation. You can add it in there. If we go into here and press edit, for example, you'll see that the resistor is already set up, and at that point, you only need to give it a parameter. There's things that you can add to these additional models, especially if maybe it's a silicon resistor, but really, quite frankly, this is all you really need to do for the SPICE. And so you don't have to bring in any circuit models, you don't have to bring any .mdl models to this. We're keeping it very simple, and Altium handles resistors and capacitors almost automatically just by you saying that you want to use them. So I'm going to press cancel over here because this has already been set up. We'll press cancel over here as well. But I do need to have a power source, and where can you find them? I guess that's the question is. Well, Altium does provide that particular library with the download. So we're going to go up over here to libraries, and we are going to click on install, and I'm going to install from a file. Now it's going to bring it up. Now I played with this a little bit earlier before we did the recording on this, and you see it automatically jump to it. But just to give you a better idea of this, when you install Altium, Altium is putting in additional files. So if I go to Altium AD14, there's always the examples. So these are your Bluetooth or your other examples for the PCB. Okay, some FPGA examples in there as well. If I go back up here, there are some libraries. Now you'll see where I'm going with this in a moment. And then we also have templates, and every single type of template would be in here as well. Now the only reason you're not seeing these is because Altium is currently filtering these for .integrated libraries. But let me jump up over here and go back to the libraries. You'll see that there's a number of different libraries. Very few of these are actually used for footprints. However, they do provide this one for simulation, which I'm going to click on here, and you can see all the different libraries that Altium provides. So you can take a look at these and see what they provide in here, and there's some documentation on their website about it. The key one that I want to use right now is this one called Simulation Sources. So I'm going to press open, and that's now been added into my list here. So anytime I open up another project, by the way, it's always going to be there because it's under the Install tab. If I actually save this as part of the project, it would only be a part of my Simple Spice project. So just another note to be aware of, that anytime anything's put in the Install tab, it is available for all projects until you remove it. So I'm going to press close, and it's now been added in. So I'm going to now change over to the Simulation Sources. And this particular one that I want to look at is a voltage. So I'm going to type in the V here, and that's going to jump me down to where we've got over here. And so what I want is a voltage source. So I'm going to click on this here, and I'll place it down. Okay, before I do place it down, I'm going to hit my tab key and make a few changes. So I'm going to say V1. Okay, and then in addition to this, I do want to have a value. Now, of course, since this is coming from the library, they've already set up the simulation model, so it's a matter of me just editing it. So I can go in here, you can see that all this stuff has been set up. The only thing it really needs to know is a value. So I'm going to hit the 5 here, and I can put a suffix. So Altium is smart enough to know that if you put like 5 volts or 5 amps, it's smart enough to know to remove that part. So you can leave this like this so that there's enough detail to it. The only danger here, just as a side note, is that if you're doing something like 2.5 volts, then it needs to show as 2.5 volts. There's a nomenclature that people use where it says, for example, 2V5, and that won't work. It'll look upon, or Altium will look upon that as basically being 2 volts, and it will truncate anything after the V. So even if I typed in, for example, 2 volts, or pardon me, 5 volts here, Altium will accept this because anything past the V is going to really just be ignored. So be aware of using that nomenclature where you use the V as the decimal separator. In fact, I'll leave it like this and I'll press OK. So there's the value here. So as a matter of fact, I could have just changed this value here and I didn't even have to go into the edit in this particular instance. So I've got this down, I'm going to press OK, and we'll drop that down right over here, and then I'm going to escape out. Now, one of the key elements of doing any type of, any type of SPICE simulation is that you need to have a ground. There always has to be a reference. That's node 0 in the SPICE coding if you've ever taken a look at the codes for SPICE. So I'm going to put a ground over here, and I'm going to do a ground over here, and I'm going to right click off. Now at this point it's just a matter of doing some wiring. I'm going to hit my P key, which is going to bring up the place menu. That's what these underlines are over here. I've got my menu now up, and then I can either just click on wire, I can hit the W, and now I'm going to be in the wiring mode. So I'll just click these in here very quickly and get those done. Alright, now that I've got this set up, there's actually one more I'm going to do. So I'm going to hit PW again, and I'm going to extend this one out because that's going to be a node that I want to look at. Do need to add a net label to this, so again, I'll just hit the P key, brings up the menu here. I look for the net label, it's the N, I'll hit the N key here, so here's my label. So I'm going to change this here, so I'm going to hit my tab key just to change this over. I'll call this VIN. I'll press OK, and drop this down, and then I'll hit my tab key again. I'll call this VO, or V out, pardon me, and we'll put this one out over here. Now, one other thing I'll do very quickly with this one, which I should have done a little earlier, is I'll click in here and I want to make the value known. Press OK. So in theory, the idea behind this is that if I simulate this, we should basically get a voltage divider here. It should be 2.5 volts since these are equal resistors. So I think I'm pretty much good to go at this point. I do want to save what I've got, so I'll save this up here. All right. So since I have models for all of these, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the simulation for Altium. So I'm going to go into Design, and I'm going to go into Simulate. Now, if you have not done anything with the Webench, it doesn't automatically come up in Altium. You have to install it, which we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. if you go to simulate, you will get something that says mix sim, and you can click on that. Or, just to give you another thing here, if you want icons, if you right click up over here, you can add in mix sim over here as well. By default, Altium does not add these in, but if I click on this, it'll add them in. Now the only reason I'm not bringing this one up here is that it can get confused with the ones for the Webench, which is what this WBSE is all about. So we'll just run it through the menus, and I'm going to go over here to design, I'm going to go to simulate, and I'm going to go over here to mix sim. So now Altium is bringing up these basically the active nodes and what analysis I want to do. And unfortunately, I'm not going to go very deep into all these different analyses at this point, but I'm just going to run maybe a few of them over here. The key one is the test point operating analysis, and just understand what the operating analysis, that's really just a number. And then there's the transient analysis, which is really going to be a plot here. And then Altium wants to know, well, what do you want to take a look at? Well, for us, the only two that I'm going to look at are V in and V out, so we'll put those over here, and we should be good to go, and I'll press OK. Okay, so now Altium just went out there and it did this. Now this is a really simple design. Basically, we just put a DC current in, or probably DC voltage in, and we just split it along. So this is what we would have expected from V in and for V out. So this is a good sign that everything's working. And just to show you this, here is the message panel. Everything looks good, and we didn't get any error messages, which is a very good step going forward here. If you do get errors, you do want to fix those things. One other thing I'll mention, I should have mentioned it earlier on here, is that when you're doing SPICE simulation, it has to be in a PCB dock. Even if there's going to be no PCB later on for this, you still need to put in a PCB dock, otherwise you won't be able to run this. So just be aware that you have to have this in here as well. So this looks pretty good at this point. So now we've got to take a step forward into the Webench aspect of this. So the reason we set this up over here is because in order to get Webench working, we actually have to have a model kind of up and running so that Webench comes back to us and provides us additional information about how to proceed. It's a little odd how Altium did it, but if you follow along with this, it'll make some sense. So what we're going to do first, or what we would need to do first, is we would have to go into our Dxp Extensions and Updates, and we would go over to our updates, or in this case purchase. Now in this case we already have it installed, so you would have to basically take a look for it. But if we go down over here, you'll see something that'll say Webench, and at that point you'll click on it and you'll have Altium downloaded onto your system. But you're not out of the woods at that point in time. At this point, once you've done that, at a minimum you should be able to close Altium out, bring it back on up, and after you've done that, you'll be able to at least see the icons in the schematic here. So you'll see the little icon here, you'll see this new menu that gets added in over here, and again, even through the design, if you go to simulate, you'll see this action over here as well. The icons are up here. So it looks as though you're ready to go, but there's a few other gotchas that you got to recognize or work with here. So the next aspect of it is, let's run this as the Webench. And again, I can go into the menu, but I'm going to actually click on this little start menu thing, and I'm going to click on it at this point. All right, and I'm going to drag this over here, and you'll notice that, okay, it went through the compiler, it made a connection to the Webench, which is online, but the simulation failed, and we need to check the log files. And this feature should come up, and if it doesn't, you can always pull it up from the output directory of your project. So what is it saying? Well, the problem is that now we need to get the license for this in order for it to work. So Altium has the connection capability to the Webench, however, it just doesn't have the license for it. And this is actually really important because you need to take this log file and mail it off to TI. And so the question you may have then is, well, okay, that's fine. Where is that located? All right, so let me bring that up over here on this other side. All right, and I'm going to bring this here. All right, so what we went to over here is basically the blog for Altium, and this was the information that Altium provided regarding to the Altium connector. And so take a look at that over here. But what they want you to do is there's a setup, a series of commands, and the key thing over here is really you've got to take that log file that just came up on your screen or in your output projects and send it over here to WBSE@ti.com. All right, so you just take that, you stick the log file in there, and then after that, it's going to, Texas Instrument will send you back an email with the actual license file at that point. So once you get that, now the question is, great, I've got it, where do I need to put it? Well, I'll give you a little hint here. So I'm going to move this out of the way. Once you've got your file, then the best thing to do is to go into Dxp Preferences. All right, in Dxp Preferences, you'll see that there's simulation, and under simulation there is the Webench simulation engine. Well, right over here is where Altium installed it on your machine. Okay, so you can always do a Control-A to select it all, and you can do a Control-C to copy it, and then you can open up Windows Explorer and go to that directory and place this in, and I'll show that to you here right now. All right, so I brought that up over here. So again, all I did was a copy and paste from my preferences. I opened up Windows Explorer, I pasted that into this into this finding location over here and brought it up. Now, what you do is in your email, you'll get something that's called node_license. For our purposes, what we did over here, so just to expedite the recording of this, we already had the license, so we just gave an extension _old. But now I'm going to actually remove that .old here and leave it like this, and now this is functional for the most part. Okay, so I'm going to push this out of the way here, and I'm going to press, and at this point I'm basically going to cancel out of the preferences, and I'm going to save this. Okay, I don't have to restart Altium Designer. I am going to close the SDF because Altium has a tendency to reuse the same SDF. So I'm going to remove that one. Do I want to save changes? The answer is no. Okay, so, and I'll also close the log at this point as well. So I'm back over here, and at this point in time I should be able to click on this. All right, so let's take a look and see what happens. Now I'm going to bring back the messages. So Altium was able to go out to the workbench, pardon me, the Webench, and it was able to communicate with it. It went in there, took the circuit, analyzed it, and it says stimulation was completed successfully. However, you can see now that nothing really came up. Well, what's the deal? Well, there's one little other aspect that you're going to need in order for this to work. There's a file that, as of the release of Altium Designer 14.3 with this Webench, there's a file that they forgot to give you. And because of that, you're going to have some issues unless you actually add this particular file to your directory where your project is. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to use another really neat feature called Explore, and that's going to open up where this project resides. And I just happen to have where this other one from another project exists. So what you need to get is this file. It's called the ISSpice or isspice.enl. You have to have a copy of this. You can do a Control-C to copy it from wherever you got it, and you can do a Control-V over here so that you can add it into this project. Now the PRJ PCB doesn't have anything to do with it, but what will happen is that when Altium runs this, it will actually find this over here, and it should display the information that we want to see at this point. So I'm going to move this out of the way here. I will save this since there is, actually I don't want to save this part. We'll say no, and we will save this here, and then we will run this again, and hopefully at this point we should see some results. Okay, so it did run this successfully. Okay, and it seems like it's being a little bit grumpy, but the big thing here is that we want to go over to sim data. Now the sim data panel, I'll just make a mention here, the sim data panel is showing actually right now that we don't even have anything in this. So let's do one other thing here. But by the way, what I was going to mention here with the sim data panel is that this panel always comes up when you're doing SPICE simulation. So whether you're doing this with the Webench or you're doing this with Altium Designer directly, it stores all the points of data for all of the for all the nodes. And so even if there's one that you didn't want to capture a waveform on, you can drag it over there. In some cases it did preserve that information. You can bring it in. But let's see, let's close this out here again, and we'll say save the changes, no. And let's do the following. I need to go over here, I'm going to hit this little wrench, and I'm going to click on that, and let's see what we got going on. Well, the problem is that this is set up slightly different from the one for the SPICE and Altium. So I do need to put this one and this one back over here. That's why we didn't get this. I'm going to leave everything else the same over here, and I'll press OK. All right, and again, I'll hit the magic green button over here, and hopefully it'll run through, and now we got our waveforms. And of course they're not very exciting waveforms because obviously our input is a 5 DC and our voltage divider is 2.5 DC, which is what we expect. But notice also that over here we do have some data. And what's nice about this panel over here, just to give you a little more information, is that you can put cursors on these things. There's a whole capability in what we call the charts, plots, and waves in Altium. But I can add a cursor over here. I can also add cursor B in here. And by doing that, I can actually move these things around, and I can get minimums and maximums and deltas and so on and so forth. Back over here as well, if I want to, I can also add a wave. So I can remove waves, or I can edit the waves in such a way. If I click on edit, for example, if I want my my V out, I can go over here and I can say, hey, give me V out here, and I'll create it, and now it's changed it to V out. And there's ways of also adding it in so that they are stacked on top of each other. But that just gives you a very general overview of how both of them work. Again, 99% of it, let's say maybe 90% of it is the same, because you're doing everything in Altium. It's just a matter of Altium communicating with the test bench, or the part of the Webench engine.